Welcome back to FastForward U Presents Start Here, the podcast about entrepreneurship and innovation right out of Johns Hopkins University. I'm one of your hosts, Kerry Ingram, and I'm here with
Erica Avery
and
Demario Northington.
Sorry, Demario. I didn't mean to cut you off, but yes, we have three hosts now. Demario, who we interviewed in our last episode, is now going to be with us for our future episodes, and it's really exciting to have him. So, Demario, is there anything that you want to say as your first hosting experience on a podcast?
Yeah, so I always love getting to know new people, learning about what they're doing, especially the entrepreneurs and people involved in entrepreneurship in Baltimore. So it's super exciting just to be able to pick their brains for a little bit and learn more about them.
Yeah, and we're really excited to have a third great perspective of someone who can ask really great questions, especially because Demario, like Erica, they both have medical backgrounds, and I'm here having that. So it's always great. And it'll definitely come in handy as we continue on interviewing people. But today we got the chance to speak with Kory Bailey, who is part of UpSurge Baltimore. Really excited to talk to him because he's super busy, and we have been candidly contacting him a lot to just make his brain on different things at FastForward U. So I was really happy that he said yes to this podcast episode. So without further ado, here's our interview with Kory. Kory, welcome to our podcast. We're really excited to have you. If you could start off by answering the standard question I always ask everyone, could you tell the listeners who you are and what you do in Baltimore?
Sure. My name is Kory Bailey. I am the Director of Relationship Development for an organization called UpSurge Baltimore. What I do in Baltimore, I am a dad of three boys, so mostly a glorified taxi driver. But what I do for UpSurge is I work with founders and the startup community to really help generate more high growth startups in Baltimore, something that I know that JHTV is a big part of. So I'm here to support founders and their company and their growth.
Awesome. So my question is, what does the Director of Relationship Development entail? Because I love that title.
Sure. So on a daily basis, so the day-to-day work that I do is really meet with a lot of founders, a lot of investors, a lot of entrepreneur support organizations, ecosystem partners, anyone who really touches the startup community in Baltimore, so that I can understand the full landscape, what resources are available, what spaces and places people can work from, what funding sources founders might leverage so that I can make recommendations, introductions, and sort of right time, connections for people, for founders and their companies throughout the ecosystem.
Yeah, so that's exciting. I'm really curious to know, what do you find the most exciting about startups in Baltimore?
One, that there's just such a broad range of them. I mean, we clearly have strengths in life sciences, in medical technology, med tech, in cybersecurity, but there's a ton of other companies out there that are building companies in the fintech space, and the sort of the SaaS and computer cloud-based technologies, food tech, you name it. There's a wide range of companies growing here, and what excites me is the diversity of founders here. We have young people as young as 21, 22, 23 building exciting companies. We have people well into their 60s that are building exciting companies, and they look like the people on this screen, Black women, Black men, young women. It's just a very diverse group of founders in Baltimore, so I'm excited to see their companies grow and succeed.
Okay, you mentioned being a father, so I kind of want to backtrack a little bit to that and ask, are there any connections in the skills that it takes to be a parent that you can apply to your job and vice versa? And then also, what is it like trying to juggle being a parent and also working in such a fast-paced environment and industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say that the experience of being a parent is probably the best experience at doing my job, because I have to be able to relate to people, sort of meet them where they are. My sons, I have three boys. They're 10, 10, and 8. So came into the parent game strong, two at the same time. They have very different personalities, very different talents and passions and things that they enjoy doing. So it's great practice for relating to people on a one-to-one level, really trying to get to the core of what motivates them and sort of their personality and communication styles. So I would say that being a parent probably is the best experience for a role like the director of relationship development. And in terms of how you balance that or how you juggle being a parent with the fast pace of this job, it's exciting on both ends. You know, one minute I'm having a meeting with an entrepreneur, the next minute I'm picking my kids up from school and you know, throwing batting practice at baseball practice. So it's a good sort of switch off and on. The pace never really slows down, but I'm okay with that. We can slow down when we retire or when we're no longer here.
I love that answer. I always feel like people who have like such fascinating jobs like that would make like fantastic parents. Like it makes sense.
I hope so.
Yeah. So I read a little bit about how you mentioned the culture shift to equitech. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and like what makes an inclusive innovation economy.
Yeah, and I, you know, I'll say we're not alone in that mindset and that thinking. You know, there are venture studios and other entrepreneur support organizations and other ecosystems that are really starting to see the shift, the culture shift, and the economic shift towards supporting founders and companies that haven't traditionally gotten the operational support or funding that they've needed to get their ideas to market. And the fact that younger generations really want to be involved with companies and technologies that are making the world a better place. You know, you think about environmental issues, you think about societal issues, you think about sort of access and opportunity issues that a lot of different demographics face. And the truth is, more people want an equitable society. So we have this idea that Baltimore has diversity as a core strength, and we're going to lean into that. We really want to be a place where diverse innovation happens, and if we very intentionally think about how we do that, and then how it affects the you know the citizens of Baltimore from the very beginning, then I think we'll be able to move in that direction. And I'm excited that Equitech is something that is very, very sticky, both on the grassroots level. People want it. People want to be a part of it. And then major corporations, even at the top level, are understanding that that's how we advance economically, is by supporting the innovation economy and doing so in an equitable way.
And I know you said that your role is very, very fast paced. So how do you manage to continue to learn to stay on top of things in your roles as you work with various companies in different industries?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think I'm always learning. I find learning opportunities in a lot of different places. You mentioned one earlier with my kids. Sometimes they can say or give a perspective, you know, that I as a 42-year-old might not have. You know, what's interesting is I draw on sort of something that my grandfather used to tell me. He said, if you talk to someone younger than 8 and older than 80 every day, then they'll give you a pretty good perspective on life. So I try to bring that to just my day-to-day living, and learn from young people, young entrepreneurs, people who've been in this industry and in these businesses for a long time. And I read a lot of books. I listen to a lot of audio books. I'm always trying to inform myself on topics that interest me, whether that be how to grow inclusive startup communities, all the way to sort of family history projects and interesting titles and more recently, a lot of authors from Baltimore, just so I can sort of understand the history and context of this city as well. Only being here for about a little over 3 years, I want to know, Baltimore is a fascinating place to me. It's one that is very welcoming. It's a city that sort of wraps its arms around you. So I find myself wanting to learn more and more perspectives about people in and from Baltimore.
Where are you from?
I'm originally from Durham, North Carolina, so not too far from here. But it's a town that has a lot of the same features and history of Baltimore, and I find some similarities there, which is why I really feel at home here in Baltimore.
Did you feel like in North Carolina, like, did you already know in your head that you were going to end up in the entrepreneurship community? Like, how did you get your start and how did you end up in Baltimore?
No way. I mean, I've always been sort of. I tell people I'm from that last generation that grew up analog. Like we actually had to meet each other at places and call each other on landline phones and hope for the best. But I never thought I'm going to be in technology. I've always been interested in technology. My very first internship in 1995, I'm telling my age now, was with IBM when they were developing the ThinkPads, and I remember being fascinated by the fact that this large box computer that we all got used to with the floppy disks was going to somehow be able to fit in to your parents' briefcase. So I've been tech adjacent for a very long time, always sort of using emerging technology, whether that be email marketing software or, fundraising technology. And I got my first sort of entry point into, the tech economy back in the mid 2010s, living in Indianapolis, working for a few tech companies there. One was a larger organization called Blackbaud, which was tech for nonprofits. And then a startup that spun out of the High Alpha Venture Studio, which was a marketing tech platform called Sigster. So that got me really interested in startup communities and sort of how they can scale and grow. And it's been, a lot of fun being in the startup community ever since.
That's a good segue because my next question was going to be what is the most rewarding part of your job?
The most rewarding part is just seeing people that have ideas that haven't traditionally, been in the market and trying to figure out ways to change the world, through technology. I'm always fascinated, by people who can identify a problem and say, hey, you know what? I think technology can help us solve that problem. And I'll say this, startup communities and how they support one another, how they engage with one another. Even if people are working on completely different things, there becomes this spirit of collaboration and sort of shared vision. And I'm excited for that. Like I'm excited that people love, the Equitech vision for Baltimore, and that it has so many really influential organizations and people in Baltimore supporting that movement towards tech for good, tech for all, Equitech.
And just going back a little bit, I know you majored in communications, and I'm curious to know what was your goal as an undergrad, and then how did that help you in the entrepreneurial field?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I just sort of naturally gravitate towards learning more about how people engage with each other, how they can understand each other a little bit better. And that I sort of fell into communications as a major because of that. Actually minored in African American studies as well. But I've always had this sense that if we could just empathize with one another, walk a mile in each other's shoes, share a meal together, we can all just understand each other a little bit better. So, my degree in communications was both interpersonal communication and also with a heavy emphasis on performance studies as well. I liked really synthesizing people's work, their writings and putting that into sort of a visual structure in collaboration with a lot of my classmates. So I found myself doing monologues and plays and performances of people's literature and works, which to me is almost a beautiful form of communication when people can come together and try to have a shared understanding of someone else's perspective.
That's a really interesting point too, because I think one of the questions we often get from students is, what should I study in college in order to do better as an entrepreneur? And I don't know if we ever really have a clear answer for them. And especially at Johns Hopkins, a lot of the students are here for something in the medical field. So I'm interested, do you have any suggestions on, even if it's not a major, just classes that you think students should take, or topics that a startup team should have, like one person be an expert in each topic in order to kind of succeed? I know that's a really big question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question though, right? I think as an ecosystem at large, whether that's higher ed, or even before, right, in secondary education, or folks that might not have an opportunity to plug into the college and university system, there should be opportunities for them to learn the basics of entrepreneurship, what it takes to both personally in your personal growth, develop the skills necessary to be entrepreneurial and to think as an entrepreneur, but also the basics of how to then develop a business. And so that's something that at UpSurge and across the ecosystem we're working on, is creating those clear pathways, clear opportunities for learning, no matter where you are in that journey. I sold, blow pops in high school, right? That's entrepreneurial. I'm telling on myself a little bit, but I sold burned CDs in college. That's those are ventures. Those are entrepreneurial ventures, and you kind of just trial and error. But I would say anybody who's in a university setting, have a good, well-rounded base of knowledge when you first come in. Start to really lean into the professors that excite you, lean into the subject matters that you become more curious about, and then that'll help you develop sort of the expertise in the field that you're most likely to enjoy working in. I don't want to recommend that anybody say, well, you're at Hopkins, so you got to get into the medical field. There's going to be something that happens in Baltimore with a nonprofit organization or a professor, or as you engage as a member of the community, that's really going to influence what you care about. So I encourage people to recognize those things and then lean into the learning opportunities that help them develop those skills needed to make a difference in that space.
So going back to talking about UpSurge specifically a little bit, can you talk to us about how people would get involved with UpSurge and what that process is like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we sort of talked a little bit about there being, different people that want to engage with us. If you are an entrepreneur, a founder of a company, or someone with an idea, we want everyone throughout that entrepreneurial journey to come to us with either their ideas, the opportunities that they have in Baltimore, the challenges that they're facing, so that we can help reduce some of those challenges and illuminate those opportunities. We want to be able to point people in the direction of, a FastForward program or a social innovation lab program. So if there's an accelerator or an incubator that your idea or your company might fit into, we want to be able to direct you in that direction. If you're out looking for funding and, haven't utilized the resources at TEDCO or met some of the folks in venture, we want to make some of those introductions for you. If you're a major corporation and you want to support the innovation and startup community, let us know what resources you have available, what members of your team that we can leverage to help those companies grow. So no matter who you are connected to the startup ecosystem, from students to corporations, we want to be able to get you plugged in and help grow the innovation economy in Baltimore.
Awesome. And I think that leads to my closing question, which is, how can people connect to you? What pages can they go on? What emails can listeners contact in order to work with UpSurge?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to just get some information about what we're doing and the vision, you can visit www.upsurgebaltimore.com. If you want to reach out to me directly, find me on LinkedIn, Kory with a K, Bailey. You can reach out to me via email, Kory@upsurgebaltimore.com. And there's a way you can sign up to stay connected to us through the website as well. We've got a great newsletter that goes out bi-weekly, gives people a really great up-to-date snapshot on all the things happening in the startup community. So engage, reach out. We'd love to meet you and love to support.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Kory. We really appreciate your time, especially because I know you're super busy. So we really learned a lot in this short period of time. And if you ever need anything from us, we'd be more than happy to help as well.
Well, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So it's time for our fave finds for this episode. I have a experience as my fave find, which I don't think that I've had before. And it came really randomly, but there's a part of Maryland called Haverty Grace, which, depending on who you ask, they have different feelings. Haverty Grace to me reminds me of like those old storybook, like old people towns. I just think it's very cutesy. It's one of those towns that you can just easily walk through, and they have all these like local random stores and stuff, like antique shops and stuff. So for me, someone who identifies as an 80-year-old stuck in a 24-year-old's body, I love Haverty Grace. But I know some people can think it's a little bit of a quirky town, but I didn't know that they had a tea house, and I've always wanted to go to a tea room and can never find one in Maryland. So they have one called Bella's Tea Room. And if you look online, their socials, they kind of just only post about like little kids parties, so I wasn't sure if I'd enjoy the experience. But when I went, there was nothing but adults, and it was great because if you have food allergies, they don't typically bake with allergens, so that was nice for me. And I got myself a nice pot of tea, which I'm not a huge tea drinker, but I did like it. It was like berry something, and a huge scone that had chocolate chips in it, and I've been thinking about it all week. So that's my fave find, and I recommend you guys going if you have the opportunity. It's like a drive, I would say like 45 minutes from Baltimore, but I think it's definitely worth it.
Oh yeah, I'm a tea connoisseur, so that is like exactly my jam.
I didn't know that. Do you have a favorite tea?
List. Anything that has like a floral like tone to it. So like jasmine is usually like my go-to kind of thing, which I know is like very basic, but I don't know. So that's definitely like on my list now for sure.
I think you definitely like it. I really was excited because of the aesthetic, because it's like a dollhouse come to life, which I was all for. But yeah, like you get to pay a certain price for what you get. So like I just got the cheapest one because I don't drink tea, but they give you a whole freaking pot, and then the scone, and then like fruit. But they go up to like having these little tiered trays with all the cute like dainty snacks and sandwiches. So I think the next time I go, I'm going to get it. But I definitely recommend going.
Yeah. That sounds super fun. We should have a FFU tea house.
I love it. An FFU tea party. Let's do it.
Yeah. Oh my God. No, I'm really excited. Like, get all dolled up and everything. Like, after this pandemic, yes.
Mario, are you a tea drinker?
I am. I used to drink tea every morning, especially when the hot water sink was working here. I would get
you in that sink.
But yeah, I love tea, so I'm going to have to check that out. I like green tea a lot, but any type of tea that I'm willing to try, especially anything that's like mango flavored or
yes,
mango is definitely my top flavor, but green tea as well.
Awesome. Well, what are your guys' fave finds?
Mine's a little bit of like a personal plug. So I won the Achievers Award for National Disability Employment Month for kind of some disability advocacy that I do. I encourage people to be the best allies they can be. And, on a larger scale, we need to change the culture of how we look at disability and include people with disabilities in academia more actively. And that includes everything from mental health to chronic illnesses and much more, invisible disabilities. And if you do have a disability, don't be like me, don't internalize that ableism, for so long. And, if you have needs or function differently, that you deserve to be able to function in a system that accommodates you and makes things accessible. And it's, okay to speak up for yourself. So that's my fave find.
I think that's absolutely awesome, Erica. And I had no idea that you were doing any work in that field until I saw the article. And we were all like, our team was like, look at Erica. So I'll make sure to also link that article with this episode, because I think the work that you're doing is absolutely phenomenal and it's super important.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think one of the reasons you probably don't hear me talk about it a lot is because FastForward U is so great and wholesome, and I don't need to like bring it up ever. I mean, I think people on the East Baltimore campus that I work with and the lab space and graduate school hear me kind of always talking about it because it is such a like active barrier here that I think a lot of us are trying to deal with. So that's why I'm like kind of more loud about it. But over here, but like FastForward U has always been so great. So I think that's also kind of a plug for FastForward U. I mean, I think it's the most, it's always been, I think, accessible. And I think entrepreneurship in general is kind of a place where people are not put into a box and forced to function in this very specific way.
So I'm glad that we are doing something right here in that terms. And if there's ever a chance, I guess going out to future interns that we might have that are listeners right now, if there's ever a chance in which anyone ever works with us, I think our team really values being told what needs to be changed in that regard so that we can improve and so that we can make our space as inclusive as possible authentically, because it is important. And you're right, like there's so many obstacles that people have to overcome. And then adding on to that, the obstacles that are put in place for people with disabilities, it's not fair and it's not right. And people need to speak out about it, regardless of whether or not they have a disability, or people who don't have them should also be working towards that. So thanks, Erica. That's a fantastic fave find, and I'm glad that you included it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm glad to be able to toot my horn.
All right, Demario, your first fave find. I'm excited to hear it.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to follow up after Erica, but I would say my fave find is actually food. So I went to Poppy's Tacos in Fells Point. I love Taco Tuesday, and they have some great chicken tacos. They have great margaritas as well. So I would highly recommend anyone that's interested in Taco Tuesday, love Mexican food or tacos, to definitely go over there and try that spot.
I have a lot of friends who love tacos and love Mexican food in general. I've definitely heard of it, but I have never been myself. I have not experienced a lot of Mexican food in my life, so I feel like it's just another thing to add to the list that I gotta check out before I leave Baltimore.
Sounds good. Well, we have things to do, tea to drink, and tacos to eat at the end of this episode. But thank you guys so much for listening to our latest podcast episode. Again, if you're on the Podbean app, we are now available on iTunes, which is super exciting. And eventually, I will find time in my schedule to figure out how to get us on Spotify and other streaming platforms. But in the meantime, iTunes is where it's at. But with that being said, I'm Kerry Ingram.
I'm Erica Avery.
I am Demario Northington.
And thank you guys so much for listening to Start Here. We'll see you or talk to you next time. Bye, guys.